During the COVID years in Ottawa, basically every neighborhood went up. It didn't matter where in the city you were. There was cheap money, there was very little inventory, and there was a ton of panic buying and just a fear of missing out. If you didn't buy now, you were never going to be able to get in, was kind of the narrative. But when the market finally corrected, it didn't do so evenly. Some areas held a lot of their value, and others quietly gave back everything that they had gained and then some in those crazy years. And watching that play out over the last couple of years, I've noticed a couple of patterns. Every neighborhood that dropped hard showed the same warning signs before it happened. Inventory building up with nowhere to go, listings sitting longer than they should, and investors heading for the exit. The pattern is almost identical every time, and by the time it shows up in the sale prices, it's often too late for people who just bought there. Right now, I'm seeing some of those same signals show up around the city in a few other areas, and today I want to go through the 5 signs that I watch the most closely so you can spot a neighborhood that might be about to correct before you buy in. Sign number 1, and this is not going to be a surprise for anybody who watches the channel regularly, but it's softening in the months of inventory. Now, this one's a bit sneaky because on the surface, everything looks fine. Let's say you've been looking at townhomes in a neighborhood in the West End. Prices look stable, sales are happening, but underneath that, a few things are quietly shifting. There are more listings than there were a few months ago. The ones that are up are sitting longer, and if you run the math on something called months of inventory, which is what you get when you take the total number of listings on the market at the end of a month and divide it by how quickly those listings sold in that same period, it gives you a measure of absorption. And that number is climbing in this scenario. This is the stat I watch more than anything else because anything under 4 months of inventory generally favors sellers. That's a seller's market. Once you get above that, buyers start to have more leverage. And when it climbs past 5, 6, or 7 months, that's when prices are going to start to correct. But the thing is, the price correction doesn't happen while this number is climbing because sellers are stubborn. They priced based on what their neighbor got a few years ago. So prices hold for a while. But when inventory is piling up, nothing is moving, and eventually a seller who just has to move blinks and lowers their price. That's when the whole house of cards falls down. One seller, or sometimes even a power of sale, drops their price and sets a new comparable in the neighborhood that's going to be the benchmark for other listings going forward. So if you're a first-time buyer or somebody who's considering getting into one of these neighborhoods, it's important to not just look at the prices of the recent sales. It's important to look at the trends of the neighborhood, the months of inventory, to make sure the comparables aren't artificially elevated and about to drop if inventory has been building up. This is where the correction shows up. It's the canary in the coal mine before the price drop. So pay attention. Sign number 2 is investors are heading for the exit. This is one of my favorite signals because it is, again, a canary in the coal mine. Investors are often watching things like months of inventory more closely than someone who's just looking to sell their house and hasn't transacted in a few years. They're often paying attention to this stuff. So when you see a cluster of investor-owned properties hitting the market at the same time, especially condos or townhomes that were clearly bought to be rentals, that tells you that the math has stopped working. The rent no longer covers the mortgage, the condo fees went up, or it can mean that they're staring at a special assessment and would rather cut their losses. Investors have no emotional attachment to their properties, so when they're starting to sell, pay attention because there's usually a stone cold reason that they're doing so. I've seen this in a few Ottawa pockets recently. You look at the listings and you can tell it's like a 1-bedroom condo that's tenant occupied, or a townhouse that's just been like freshly repainted, but when you go through it, you can see that it's just kind of been done up quickly and it hasn't been taken care of the way an owner normally would take care of it. It's just an investor who's kind of done what they need to do, changed out the flooring they need to change to get it ready for sale. So if you're a buyer and you're looking at condos or townhouses or anything else, and you see that investors are dumping the properties in the neighborhood, you need to understand why they're selling, because whatever made the numbers stop working for them, that same math is going to apply to you. Now, sign number 3 is rental vacancy is climbing, and this matters to you even if you're not looking to rent your home because it's indicative of demand. I had a client who bought a condo, planned to live there for, say, 5 years. 18 months later, their situation changed. They had to move for a job, and they couldn't sell without taking a major loss. So the natural next step is, all right, I'm going to rent this thing to cover off on the mortgage. and it sat empty for months. Now, that backup plan they didn't think they'd need, it wasn't there when they needed it. Rental vacancy is a leading indicator of housing demand. If rentals in a neighborhood are sitting empty or rents are dropping, it means fewer people want to live there at the current prices. And that eventually hits the ownership market too, because the pool of buyers and the pool of renters often overlaps, especially for condos and townhomes. So before you buy, it's worth taking a quick look on rental.ca. See what's listed in the area. If there's a ton of listings that have been sitting there for a long time, or you're noticing a trend of price decreases in the neighborhood for rent, that is a red flag to pay attention to. Now, section number 4 is a bit of a weird one because it can be a good sign for a neighborhood too. It's new construction flooding the area. Put yourself in the shoes of a first-time buyer. You've got a budget of around $550,000. You're looking at resale homes, and suddenly a builder pops up offering you a brand new townhome with no bidding war, a closing cost credit, and a full warranty, and the peace of mind of knowing that your home is brand new. That might take some of your interest off of the resale market, and that's exactly the problem for anybody who already owns in that neighborhood or who is considering buying. When builders complete their projects, there's a whole glut of new homes that hit the market all at once, and any resale listings are going to be competing with those new listings. So if you're buying a townhouse in this neighborhood resale and you're planning to maybe sell in the next 5 years, if that overlaps with one of the phases of the new construction hitting the market, you're going to have a ton of competition, and that could potentially drive down your sale price. Now, this one's a bit of a double-edged sword because it does mean there's demand in the neighborhood, and I'm not saying not to buy in a growing suburb, but if you're buying resale in an area with 3 active builder sites within 5 minutes, your home's value isn't just going to be competing with those other resale listings when you go to sell. It could potentially be competing with a whole lot of brand new homes. That changes your resale outlook. Now, the last one doesn't show up on any housing data, but it's one of the most important signals. And that's when neighborhood anchor businesses start disappearing. If there's a local coffee shop that's been on the corner for 10 or 15 years and it closes, when you're driving through and you count 3 or 4 for lease signs on the main strip, or when some of the small businesses that gave the neighborhood its character start disappearing, that's telling you something about the foot traffic, about the spending power, and about how many people actually want to live and be in that area. Commercial health and residential demand are inextricably connected. The businesses that survive in a neighborhood do so because there's enough people with enough money living nearby to support them. So when one of those businesses, especially a local beloved business, starts failing, it's often a leading signal that the residential demand is just not there, or at the very least is starting to soften. This is the kind of thing you can't find on a spreadsheet. You have to actually drive the neighborhood, walk the main street, or talk to people who live in the area to get an idea that this is going on. So before you buy in one of these neighborhoods, take a drive, or better yet, a walk around and see if any of these signs present themselves. If they do, pay attention and be careful when buying in that area. None of these signs by themselves spell doom for a neighborhood, but if you see more than 2 or 3 of them, it's definitely worth paying attention to see if this neighborhood that you're considering buying into might be more of a liability than you think. As always, if you have any questions, never hesitate to reach out. Appreciate you taking the time to watch, and have a wonderful rest of your day.